Are you ready? Are you ready for literature review? Are you? Are you sure? Are you mad at me yet for saying that 4 times? I think so. So I'll stop. Literature review. Okay, this is what we're talking about today. This is the next step to our research project. Okay, so what is literature review? Before I get into specifics for the assignment requirements, I want to remind you to check out the sample, okay, because the sample will really help you dig in. So before we get into assignment requirements, let's talk about literature review in general. All right, what is it? So essentially, literature review is all about the scholarly conversation. You might hear that and say, what? If that sounds scary to you, try not to be scared of it. It's not as intense as it sounds. Essentially, in a literature review, we just see how our sources are interacting with our primary source. What ideas are common between our secondary source materials? What ideas show that they are in agreement with one another? What show that they are disagreeing with one another? Those are the things we want to point out. Now, I'm going to borrow something from my lunch here, this little taco sauce packet. Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert. This essay seems hard, but is not. And don't just say, it's because you're the teacher. You've done this a million times. The first time I wrote this kind of essay, I was terrified. Okay, it was a 15-page essay, and I left it till the last minute because I was just like, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to do this. I'm just going to have to figure it out. And 15 pages, I ended up writing it in 6 hours. Okay, once I started, it just clicked. And you know what? I hear that from students all the time. Now, take it from me. Don't wait until the last minute to write this essay, because sometimes it takes a little bit of time to click, but it does click for you. Okay, so just stick it out. Okay, you've got this. Basically, this is the most basic way that I can explain this to you. A literature review is essentially a book report of your secondary source materials. That's about it. Okay? Think back to the 4th grade when you had to write a book report, summarizing, maybe asking questions, right? Thinking about things like that. And then we just sort of do that with secondary sources, right? This is all about reporting information that you find in your secondary source materials. So what you're trying to do with that scholarly conversation, to come back to that metaphor, is you are, imagine this, we're gonna kind of morph into some sort of conference room. Okay, you are at a conference, and all of your secondary source authors are hanging out. Because trust me when I say, authors that write about the same works talk all the time, right? So imagine that you're a fly on the wall listening to them argue about this particular primary source that you're working with, okay? And they do this not only in person, but they do it in their writing too. So you're listening to your first author, right? You're listening to Joe Schmo over there talk about one thing. And then, Jane Smith comes in and says, I don't think so. I think that it's about this. And then you've got, Billy over there saying, okay, I kind of see where both of you are coming from, but I don't think you're quite reaching it, right? And so it's that conversation that happens within analysis, right? So imagine that your source materials are talking to one another and choose things that they have in common. Now, when I say they have them in common, I don't mean that they agree with one another. They can disagree, but they have these points of commonality. So they are talking about the same concept, even if they're talking about it differently. So what we want to do in this essay is 2 to 3 pages in length. Okay, cool. 2 to 3 pages, pretty chill. And you want to pick out 3 things that these sources, or some of these sources, have in common. Now, these 3 things that you pick out should be something that helps you with your research proposal, right? Or if you've shifted your ideas since your initial research proposal, that kind of go in line with something you want to argue, right? So we're trying to sit down and pick apart the analysis that these authors are doing, and not only within their individual sources, but also in reference to other authors as well, right? These other scholarly sources that you're working with. So you really want to kind of dig into that and find out where they agree, where they disagree, where they're indifferent to one another because they're talking about completely different things. All right. So in your 2 to 3 page essay, you're going to have 3 to 4 body paragraphs or so, and each of those body paragraphs are going to outline one particular commonality. Okay. In each body paragraph, you want to reference at least 2 scholarly sources, right? Because if it's all about the conversation, the only time you're going to have a conversation with yourself is if it's like me talking to my video camera right now, right? You want to identify conversation. So 2 to 3 sources per body paragraph. So make sure you find enough source material to reference that commonality that you want to discuss. All right, so we've got that. Now, how do we construct this? Right? Maybe a little context at the beginning in the introduction, right? Give the reader some information about the primary source. What do we need to know to be able to understand these ideas that are happening inside that scholarly conversation? Um, in our thesis statement, because this essay is all about our source material, it's not about our ideas, right? We're just kind of picking out those commonalities and showing how different authors discuss them differently and similarly. We're not in it. Our ideas are not in this essay at all, so our ideas shouldn't be in our thesis. Our thesis is going to discuss scholars, the scholarly conversation, and those points of intersection that our source materials kind of do interact with one another. In our thesis statement, we don't have to reference scholars by name because that would be 6 scholars to kind of throw into a thesis. That's a bit much, right? So we could just say scholars discuss our primary source in these 3 ways, right? They analyze our primary source using these 3 points of reference or something like that, right? And then we dig into that further in our essay. Then, in each of our topic sentences, we recognize specific scholars by name to say, this scholar and this scholar discuss this particular thing. And, if it's similar, if it's different, you really just kind of pick it out in that way. All right. So that's how we kind of want to have our organization. Hopefully, this is starting to seem less daunting to you, right? We're just picking out those commonalities. The hardest thing is going to be identifying them, all right? And that's first up in this particular segment of our course, right? We want to think about those intersecting ideas, and we want to write that in our first assignment. What are these points of intersection? And maybe give a little bit of information about how the sources are intersecting in a superficial way. And then as we progress, we get more and more specific. Okay? Remember, this essay will not help you unless you are specific. Specificity is the name of the game. Just like in our summary paragraph for annotated bibliography, this essay requires specificity. So anytime you are referencing a point of intersection, you want to be specific. Show the reader and yourself, your future self who is writing your essay, how these points of intersection do intersect, and also in what language, give a paraphrase to identify it, right? So you want to be specific. Don't just say Scholar A and Scholar B talk about this. Because while that might be true, Scholar A's article is 22 pages long, Scholar B's is 31. Where's the specificity so that you can use that in later assignments, right? You want that specificity so that you can use the same information later on. All right, so that is generally what this is about. So 2 to 3 pages in length, identifying the scholarly conversation, parsing out those intersecting ideas. Now, of course, you need to have your works cited page. If your works cited page is not properly formatted by this point, it really needs to be. Because at this point, you should just be copying and pasting your works cited page into your new document, right? There should be no more changes unless you make a change to your source material, all right? And of course, at any point in term, if you feel like your source material is not working, say you have 5 sources that seem to work really well together, and then there's a 6th that's just kind of doing its own thing, maybe consider swapping it out. You are always free to do that. Never feel like you are stuck with something that you've originally chosen. Same thing for your original research proposal. Don't feel stuck with that idea now that you have new context from source material. So you really want to keep an open mind, find those points of intersection, and develop those specifically for your reader. That's all that we're doing in this. It's a book report, but instead of using one book, we're taking 6 different perspectives on one book and showing how those perspectives intersect. That's it. That is it. All right, you guys, thanks so much for watching. Have a great rest of your day. Do great things, and I will see you next time. Bye.